So in the previous video, we were looking at the cardiovascular system, and in this video, we're going to look at the cardiorespiratory system, and not so much the cardiorespiratory system, but the respiratory part of the cardiovascular system. And when we looked at the cardiovascular system, we are looking at blood flow from the heart to the lungs, and we're looking at that gas exchange. And so that's what we're looking at in this particular aspect, is how we get air from the environment into the lungs, and then we get that gas exchange that's happening at the alveoli in the lung structure, and then we also have gas exchange that's happening down at the veins, or at the capillaries from the vein and artery transition. And so we have a couple things to look at. We're going to look at ventilation, so the process of getting air in and out, so inspiration, expiration. Look at the gas exchange, what's happening in the lungs, and then we'll start, but we'll look more in the metabolism and bioenergetics at cellular respiration. So ventilation is breathing in, breathing out. And we look at two types of breathing. We have quiet breathing, or belly breathing, which is diaphragmatic breathing. Then we have chest breathing, or active breathing, which is involved in higher demand activities, which you'll see during exercise, but you can sometimes see that at rest. Then we have expiration, which is when we're ejecting air out. The big thing to look at is that inspiration is an active process. This requires resources, energy, muscular contraction, and everything else, though, when we look at ventilation, gas exchange, and expiration, these are all passive process. And so when we look at gas exchange, passive process, this is the conversion or the switching of CO2 for O2 and vice versa. And then when we look at cellular respiration, this is the drop off of O2. This is the start of the ATP production for how our body takes macronutrients and converts that into energy that the cells can use. But we're just introducing the concept. We'll talk more about it in detail. So this is the respiratory system here. You can see that it includes the nose, the throat, the trachea, and then the lungs. Not all of this is the respiration aspect. It's more of the conduction, getting air from the atmosphere, from the environment, down into the lungs. Now, everything you see here is a passive process. So there's no, when we look at the heart itself, heart was muscle tissue. So it was able to change. The blood vessels themselves have some smooth muscle, as we talked about, and so does the esophagus. But the trachea and the lungs themselves, they are elastic and compliant tissue, but they don't have the ability to generate force. And so when we start looking at the musculature, we're going to look at musculoskeletal or skeletal muscle, and particularly the diaphragm, which you saw peeked up in the bottom. But here's your conducting zones, so the trachea, the bronchus, down the bronchial tree, and you can see that the bulk of the respiratory system is non-respiratory. It's mostly conducting, getting air from the environment down into the smallest areas. And if you recall, this is what we're looking at here. So we looked at the systemic, the heart, and then we looked at the pulmonary, and we're going to talk mostly about the pulmonary circuit here first, looking at the gas exchange that's happening in the blood vessels. And this is basically it. So you have your nasal cavity, and you're breathing mostly through your nose, hopefully through your nose, through your mouth if something's going on. You have your throat, and then down in the trachea, and then you have your bronchial trees, and you get all the way down here, and you get these alveolar sacs, and they look like bundles of grapes. And on these sacs here, through the alveolus, you have your vein, artery, and your capillary networks, and this is where the gas exchange is happening. So you have hundreds, thousands, millions of these throughout the lungs, and you're getting this gas exchange here. If you were to open these up, you would see that these are empty sacs, right? And so air is coming from the environment, they're getting in here, and you're getting this relationship where you have the separation between the alveoli and the capillary. So again, this is image in your book. Here's your alveoli, it's empty. These are your capillaries that are running by, and you can appreciate, here's the size of a red blood cell, and you can see how thin these walls are. Remember we said the capillaries are really thin, and the alveoli are even thinner, and this allows this gas exchange to occur. So it becomes a permeable membrane. You have blood that's lining up, dropping off O2 and picking up oxygen from its environment. And it kind of looks like this. It's like an assembly line. You're getting blood coming in, so deoxygenated blood. It's high in carbon dioxide. It's dropping off carbon dioxide as it's running through, and it's picking up more and more oxygen, and then out back to the heart to be pumped to the body. I have another schematic here that kind of shows that same aspect, where you got blood coming in, you've got one cell thick between the alveoli and the capillary. There's a pressure gradient that's here that's forcing this exchange, and this exchange is happening independent of energy. It's totally passive. So from physics or chemistry, you remember the process of diffusion, and gases move via diffusion from high to low concentration. And so in this case here, you have a permeable membrane, you have a high concentration on this side and zero or low concentration on this side, and over time, the system is trying to reach equilibrium. So given enough time, you'll have equal amount of gas or solute or product on both sides. This can happen with single aspect, and when we look here, this membrane here is this membrane here. You know, this is the thickness between the alveoli and the capillary. So here's your capillary, there's your alveoli. And in this case, instead of being one aspect, you're getting two. So you have oxygen down here, you have carbon dioxide there, and over time, you're getting a slow diffusion between, so you're getting equal amounts. Just note that you see that you're never getting full aspect, right? You're getting some oxygen, still stays in the system, and some carbon dioxide, it stays behind. But when you get these high pressure gradients, you're trying to pick up as much and drop off as much as possible. So this is what's happening. It's passive. There's no energy that's required. And when you're looking at the capillaries in the lungs, your blood is really high in carbon dioxide and very low in oxygen. And your lungs are very low in carbon dioxide and high in oxygen because you breathe that in, or at least higher than normal. And so you're getting this diffusion that's happening. Then that blood is going down to the muscles and it's high in oxygen, low in carbon dioxide. And the tissues are just the opposite. So when it gets through those capillaries down in the tissues, you are getting that gas exchange. So this is a little model that I made. You can see blood on the left, lungs on the right, and you get that permeable membrane. And when that happens, you're going to get that gas exchange. So now the blood picks up more oxygen. The lungs are taking more of that carbon dioxide. That blood's traveling down towards the muscle, and the muscle is low in carbon dioxide, but in that blood just picked up oxygen. You're getting that exchange, and it's going back and forth, back and forth. And this is basically your circuit here. You have high oxygen air that's in these alveolar sacs. You have deoxygenated blood coming through. The pressure's low. It's doing the gas exchange. Now you're getting that high oxygen blood. It's ending up in the left atrium. That's going down to the left ventricle, pumped out to the body to go to the working muscle or tissue. It's high in oxygen. The blood down there is low, or the tissue down there is high in carbon dioxide. It's doing its gas exchange. And then it goes through the veins to the right atrium, to the right ventricle, and out of the system. So that is your pulmonary circuit there with the whole aspect of respiration. And there's really not much you can do about it, right? There's not much influence. Really, if you have any influence on it, you're messing things up by blocking things within the lungs through like pollution or smoking or damaging those tissues. But most of the improvements in respiratory function come at the cardiovascular aspect of things, not so much the respiratory. But just keep in mind that the breathing mechanics, which we're going to talk about more, that with the diaphragm here and improving the ventilation, that's where your improvements come from, the cardiac muscle. So you can't really improve passive tissues, but you can improve musculoskeletal aspects. So the cardiac muscle, the skeletal muscle, but everything we just looked at with the gas exchange is totally passive process.